Claire Monroe sat quietly at the end of a long mahogany dining table, sipping from a glass of sparkling water, while her family laughed, bragged, and compared real estate deals. It was the Monroe family's monthly gathering, a tradition that felt more like a contest than a reunion. Their mansion in the hills of Marin County offered the perfect stage for performative wealth. Her cousin Ethan had just returned from closing on a vacation home in Aspen. Her Aunt Madeline proudly announced their newest vineyard acquisition in Sonoma. Even Claire's younger brother Ryan, who worked in venture capital, couldn't resist tossing in a story about partnering with a tech billionaire. Claire smiled politely, nodding at the right moments. No one noticed her silence. They never really did. To them, she was the odd one out. 35, unmarried, no luxury car parked out front. And perhaps most embarrassing of all, still renting an apartment in downtown Portland. Her mother had once called it a starter life that somehow never progressed. But what no one at that table knew, what Claire had never felt the need to share, was that she owned the very building they were sitting in. It had taken years of patience, strategy, and quiet work behind the scenes. While they played to the crowd, she built a portfolio brick by brick. They thought she sold small apartments to broke students. In truth, she was the founder and sole owner of Harborstone Capital, a private equity firm with more than $2 billion in commercial and residential assets. And tonight, as they ridiculed her one more time, they were sitting inside her property, eating off plates paid for by a maintenance fund she controlled. But she said nothing. Not yet. Dinner was served, but no one seemed particularly interested in the food. The conversation at the Monroe table had always been more about display than connection. Whoever spoke loudest usually won the evening. Ethan, ever the showman, leaned back in his chair, balancing a fork between his fingers. "I just got the keys last week," he said, referring to his new Aspen house. "It backs right into a private ski run. You can't even put a price on that kind of access." "Please," Madeline interrupted, tilting her wine glass. "Sonoma has soul. We're doing a full renovation, Tuscan inspiration. Exposed beams, wine cellar with century-old barrels shipped from Italy. It's not a vacation house. It's an experience." Claire nodded, still silent. These performances weren't new. Her Aunt Eleanor, never one to miss an opportunity for passive aggression, turned toward Claire with a sharp smile. "So Claire, how's Portland? Still in that little unit on Belmont Avenue?" Claire replied calmly, "Yes, still there, I like it." Ryan chuckled. "You're still renting. At your age, isn't that kind of temporary?" "Some people don't believe in settling," Claire said. Madeline's expression turned sympathetic, the kind of sympathy that barely hid the superiority beneath. "Well, there's still time to figure things out. Not everyone finds their path at the same pace." Ethan grinned. "Hey, if you get evicted, you can always come stay at my Aspen place. We've got a spare guest room, though no Wi-Fi in the basement." Laughter. Claire smiled again, a quiet, unreadable kind of smile. They had no idea that Belmont Avenue wasn't just her address. It was her firm's first acquisition. She had bought the entire building 5 years earlier and kept her name off public records. Harborstone had taken care of that. They also didn't know she'd recently acquired Monroe Plaza, the family's historic commercial property, the same one they still thought belonged to the original trust. As they laughed and condescended, Claire filed every word away like documentation. They didn't see her. But soon they would. And when they did, it wouldn't be because she shouted louder. It would be because she built something they never saw coming. The truth about Claire's life was buried under layers of intentional silence. It started a decade earlier when she left a flashy real estate firm in New York. She had been tired of selling overpriced condos to people who saw homes as trophies, tired of boardroom meetings where her ideas were dismissed until someone else repeated them. So she packed up and moved to Portland. With modest savings and a stubborn vision, she founded Harborstone Capital. No media coverage, no startup buzz, just long days, coffee-stained spreadsheets, and a tiny co-working desk in a shared office downtown. She began small fourplexes, aging commercial strips, overlooked corners of the city where others saw risk. She saw stories. She saw people who needed housing they could trust. While her family hosted galas and flaunted Mediterranean tiles, Claire was attending city zoning meetings and building relationships with local contractors. She reinvested every dollar. She didn't chase press. She chased good tenants, ethical partners, and long-term growth. By year 5, Harborstone had acquired over 20 buildings. By year 8, that number tripled. She diversified mid-size commercial properties, mixed-use developments, affordable housing units with historic preservation clauses. Her portfolio was quietly expanding across the Pacific Northwest, yet her name stayed hidden behind layers of LLCs and private trusts. The decision to buy Monroe Plaza wasn't emotional. It was strategic. It sat at the center of a growing retail corridor, underpriced and undermanaged. Claire reviewed the financials, saw the gaps, the lazy accounting, the inflated repair bills, and she saw opportunity. She made the offer quietly, through Harborstone's acquisition arm. No one suspected a thing. The purchase closed 6 months ago. Since then, she'd had full access to the building's records. And what she found confirmed every suspicion she'd had about her family's business practices. Preston, her cousin, had siphoned off maintenance funds to finance luxury upgrades at his ski lodge. Cassandra Madeleine's daughter had billed overpriced design fees through her husband's shell company. And no one had noticed. Until now. Claire didn't gloat, she didn't post about it. She simply began the process: audits, restructuring, accountability. Harborstone had built its name on transparency, fairness, and long-term integrity. And now, that same philosophy would apply to Monroe Plaza, even if it meant burning old bridges. Because for Claire, legacy wasn't about inheritance, it was about intention. And she intended to reclaim hers. The first signs of panic arrived in the form of whispers. Claire sat 2 seats away from her father as he adjusted his glasses and scrolled through an email on his phone. His brow furrowed. That was rare. He was a man who rarely broke posture. "Something wrong, Dad?" she asked casually. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he cleared his throat. "There's been an acquisition," he said, eyes still on the screen. "Monroe Plaza. Someone bought a majority stake. A firm called Harborstone Capital." Claire sipped her water, carefully neutral. "That sounds serious." "It is," he muttered. "The board's unsettled. No one knows who they are. They're requesting a full audit of operations expenses, contractor agreements, even tenant lease records." "Interesting," Claire replied. "Why would they do that?" Before he could respond, Ethan leaned over. "Probably one of those aggressive foreign funds. They love legacy properties. Drive up rents, flip it in 2 years. "No," Madeleine chimed in. "It's someone trying to shake things up. The kind of firm that doesn't care about the family name." Claire's mother, who had stayed quiet most of dinner, finally spoke. "You don't think they'll look too closely, do you? I mean, it's just routine, right?" But everyone at the table knew it wasn't. Preston's knuckles were white around his wine glass. Cassandra pulled out her phone and began furiously scrolling. The audit wasn't just a nuisance, it was a threat. Because once the numbers were laid bare, everything would unravel: the bloated contracts, the non-existent repairs, the shell companies that funneled money out under the guise of consulting. Claire said nothing, but inside she felt the shift. For years they had dismissed her. They laughed at her career, her city, her life. And now, they were trapped in a house she owned, dining on a budget she approved, and unknowingly facing a reckoning she had orchestrated. Later that evening, her father pulled her aside. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye," he said. "But if you know anyone in real estate, maybe someone at this Harborstone outfit, maybe you could talk to them. Ask them to ease up a bit." Claire looked at him, her expression soft but unreadable. "I work mostly with residential clients," she said, "smaller scale, not quite Monroe Plaza level." He nodded, disappointed. "Still, you're part of this family. That should count for something." Claire nodded too. "It does," she said, "but sometimes family needs accountability more than favors." She left shortly after, her worn leather bag over her shoulder. Inside were the first batch of audit documents. Each page detailed the misuse, the waste, and the silent damage done under the guise of legacy. Tomorrow, those pages would land on the boardroom table. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same again. The next morning, Claire stood before the full-length mirror in her downtown office. Gone were the jeans and cardigan she wore to family dinners. Today, she wore a tailored navy suit, clean lines, confident cut, understated power. The kind of outfit her Aunt Eleanor used to say she should wear when she finally met a decent man. Claire smiled to herself. Today, she wouldn't be meeting a husband. She'd be meeting a boardroom full of people who had underestimated her for years. Her assistant, Lena, knocked lightly before stepping in. "They're all here. Your family arrived early." Tried working the room before the independent board members showed up. Claire nodded. "Let's begin." The Monroe Plaza boardroom, perched on the top floor of the building, buzzed with tension. Executives flipped through printed reports, whispering to each other. Her family sat at the far end, tight-lipped and overdressed. Preston's blazer was a bit too bright, Cassandra's earrings a little too loud. Then the door opened, and Claire walked in. The chatter stopped. Preston stood, brows furrowed. "Who are you?" "This is a private session." Claire placed her leather briefcase at the head of the table. "My name is Claire Monroe," she said evenly. "Founder and managing director of Harborstone Capital." The room fell into stunned silence. "I own Monroe Plaza," she continued, "and several other properties your family has managed poorly." Cassandra blinked, lips parting. "Wait, what?" Her father's eyes didn't move, just his hands, tightening around his pen. Claire opened her briefcase and began sliding folders across the table. "These are audit reports. Financial irregularities, inflated invoices, deferred maintenance funds diverted to personal accounts." She looked directly at Preston. "Would you care to explain the $2 million listed as roof repairs that paid for your Aspen Lodge?" Preston turned pale. "And Cassandra," she added, flipping another document. "Your husband's firm charged 3 times the market rate for basic plumbing installations. Care to verify those invoices?" "You do this to your own family?" Eleanor gasped. Claire's voice remained calm. "I didn't do this, you did. I'm just making sure it gets corrected." Her father finally spoke, his voice lower than usual. "Claire, please, we can talk about this." Claire raised a hand gently. "No more talking. I watched this family turn a legacy of community into a personal ATM. You mocked my quiet life, my apartment, my work while I was building something you never bothered to understand." "But you pretended to be struggling," Cassandra said. "I didn't pretend anything," Claire replied. "I lived simply. You assumed simplicity meant failure." Suddenly, phones buzzed around the table. A board member read aloud from her screen. "Harborstone Capital reveals CEO identity, Claire Monroe, confirmed as sole owner. Valued portfolio exceeds $2 billion. Known for tenant-first policies and ethical redevelopment." Cassandra's hand slipped from the table. "This will ruin us," she whispered. "No," Claire said. "It might save you, if you let it." She took a breath and stood straighter. "Effective today, Monroe Plaza will operate under new oversight. No more shell budgets. No more family discounts. No more billing this place like it's your personal playground." "And if we don't comply?" Preston asked, his voice shaking. "Then I turn these reports over to the IRS. I'm sure they'd love to chat." Silence. Her father finally looked up. "What do you want?" Claire held his gaze. "I want you to remember what this name used to stand for. Integrity. Stewardship. Community." She closed her briefcase, her tone clear and steady. "Work with me to rebuild that, or find somewhere else to live." No one moved. Claire turned toward the door. "By the way," she said over her shoulder, "there are some lovely rentals in Lake Oswego. Might be perfect for a fresh start." And with that, she walked out quiet, composed, and completely in control. The fallout was swift. Within weeks, the Monroe name no longer carried the weight it once did, at least not in the circles that mattered. Aunt Eleanor quietly resigned from 3 charitable boards. Her public image had taken a hit after the audit results were leaked to the press. She claimed it was temporary, but everyone knew better. Cassandra's husband's design firm folded entirely, unable to survive the scrutiny that followed inflated billing scandals. As for Preston, federal investigators opened an inquiry into his misuse of business funds. His beloved Aspen retreat was put on the market. He refused to speak to Claire, not even at family functions. But she didn't take it personally. He was used to getting away with everything. Accountability was foreign territory. But not everything that followed was bitter. Madeline, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps from genuine reflection, started volunteering at a transitional housing shelter. She'd once scoffed at such places, called them messy charity. Now, she brought blankets and listened to residents talk about what safe housing meant to them. When she ran into Claire one afternoon in a downtown cafe, she didn't look away. "I get it now," she said softly. Claire nodded. That was enough. And her father? He didn't apologize, not at first. But a few weeks later, he called and asked to visit her office. He showed up without a driver, in casual clothes, and no expectations. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Start by listening," Claire replied. So he did. Week by week he came back. Not to reclaim control, but to learn. He sat in on team meetings, asked questions about zoning laws, ethical housing models, and what it meant to build something for people, not just profit. One evening, after reviewing reports from Monroe Plaza now operating with full transparency, and improved tenant satisfaction. He looked up and said, "You're rebuilding something I didn't even realize we'd lost." Claire nodded. We forgot what legacy really meant. She still lived in the Belmont building, still preferred walking over limos, still believed in handwritten notes and local partnerships over flashy rollouts. But her world had changed. Not because she'd finally made it, but because she'd made it right. Her family, now humbled, was slowly beginning to see the difference, not in the boardroom. In the courtyard of her building, during community cookouts, tenant meetings, holiday events. There they were learning what it meant to contribute, not just consume. And Claire? She kept her pace steady, never rushed, never performative. The woman they once pitied had become their quiet compass. Not through revenge. Through values. And that, to her, was the only kind of power worth having. Months later, Claire stood by the window of her Belmont apartment. Outside, lights sparkled across downtown Portland. In the distance, Monroe Plaza glowed with purpose, no longer a monument to excess, but a beacon of thoughtful renewal. The tenants were thriving. Small businesses on the ground floor reported growing profits. Maintenance was prompt. Trust had returned. Her phone buzzed on the table: new partnership offers, interview requests, invitations to speak at conferences. She read them, but didn't rush to respond. For Claire, success wasn't about spotlight. It wasn't about proving people wrong. It was about proving something real could still be built in a world obsessed with appearances. That evening, her mother arrived at the Belmont building. No driver, no pearls, just jeans and a windbreaker. Claire opened the door, surprised. "You came." Her mother held up the small invitation card. "The holiday courtyard party," she said. "Didn't want to miss it." Claire smiled, stepping aside to let her in. "I never asked," her mother said, looking around the apartment. "Why this? Why real estate?" Claire thought for a moment before answering. "Because buildings protect people," she said. "They hold families, memories, dreams. I wanted to be a part of that, not just buy things to impress people." Her mother glanced at a photo on the shelf. "Claire at 23, holding her first real estate license. And now you control more than all of us ever did." Claire nodded. But control was never the goal. Purpose was. Later that night, in the courtyard, the party hummed with soft laughter, warm lights, and shared food. Children iced cookies. Tenants told stories. Preston helped string lights beside a veteran tenant. Cassandra passed out cider to kids and actually smiled. Claire watched quietly. They were beginning to understand. Not all at once, but enough. Her father joined her near the cocoa table. "Your great-grandfather used to say, 'A building should shelter hearts, not just wallets.' I think we forgot that." Claire looked up. "I found his old ledgers. He wrote notes beside every line item. Tenant names. Family stories. We didn't just forget. We stopped looking." He nodded, eyes heavy with realization. "You could have ruined us." "That was never the point," Claire said, watching a little girl twirl under fairy lights. "I just wanted to build something that would outlast me." Sometimes the strongest success doesn't roar. It simply endures. And the best kind of revenge? It doesn't look like revenge at all. It looks like legacy rebuilt, redefined, and finally done right. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or quietly counted out, this story is for you. Claire didn't set out to seek revenge. She set out to build something real, something that mattered. And maybe, so are you. So tell me, what are you quietly building while others doubt you? Drop your story in the comments. Like this video if it spoke to you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that legacy isn't inherited. It's created. And don't forget to subscribe, because we've got more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and the quiet kind of power that truly lasts.